charge of driving the LinkedIn Sales Navigator and the dynamic sales execution. I want to take the time to thank him for flying out here today to be with us all the way from Seattle, and we hope that you all learned some tips on how to optimize your LinkedIn profile to be more successful with recruiters, colleagues, and professional networking. Adarsh and I have been working with Brian the last couple of months to have him come out and present on the valuable insights he has about professional recruiting. And I just want to highlight that this presentation will also be live streamed and recorded if you want to look back on it later. And then just some housekeeping things. Please hold all your questions till after the keynote presentation. And Brian will also be looking for volunteers throughout tonight, so don't feel shy. Please engage and let's have some fun. And then lastly, just a quick reminder to hold on to your Microsoft laptop stickers because that is your ticket to a free headshot after the event. And thank you everyone for coming out again. And with that, I'll hand it off to Brian Galicia.
Great, thank you so much. I didn't realize that Berkeley Time actually existed. So thank you so much, everybody, for having me. Go Bears. I truly, truly appreciate you taking the time on a Tuesday to actually come listen to some guy that you've never met before talk about LinkedIn. Before I get started, and I go a shout out to all the people watching this on LinkedIn. So if you go and connect with me on LinkedIn, which is going to be one of the call to actions, you actually will see this live stream because it is live streaming on my feed. First question I have is, who actually wants to get a job after they graduate? Hopefully everyone's raising their hand. Otherwise, you're probably going to grad school. I know there's someone in the back that's going to go to grad school, but in general, I suspect that all of you, once you get your undergraduate, graduate degree, you all want a really great, high-paying job. The one thing I want to impress on you is that LinkedIn is going to be one of those tools and solutions that you can actually leverage to actually have a higher probability to be successful in landing a job. I'm going to date myself, and I'm going to go through a history lesson, but what you're going to learn today is, one, the importance of LinkedIn. Why do you even care? Because I know all of you probably use some other social platform, such as like how many people have Instagram? I assume everyone does. How many people have TikTok? Not as many. What are some other ones? Facebook? Probably not. I think a handful. I think some people are on Facebook. I think that's kind of past. I think Snapchat. How many people have Snapchat? A lot of people. So we're going to talk about the importance of LinkedIn, building your personal brand, because one of the things that will happen when you're landing a job for the very first time, someone's going to type in your name on LinkedIn, and they're going to utilize that as their mechanism to understand who you are as a person. I do as a manager. I know recruiters do the same thing. So I'm going to showcase and talk about some best practices you can actually leverage. Talk about how do you get hired? How do you uncover jobs? How do you leverage the alumni network? And there's a lot of alumni that graduated from UC Berkeley, especially, granted, this is not a Microsoft talk per se, but I just did a quick look, and there are over 1,000 employees at Microsoft that actually graduated from UC Berkeley. When you think about one of the things I'm going to ask some of you is, what's your dream job? Like if you graduated with whatever degree you're going to graduate with, what's the #1 company you have in your mind that you'd love to work for? I'm going to show you easy ways to identify how you create those connections with alumni, utilizing LinkedIn to identify ways to get into the conversation. And then we'll wrap it up. And I got a list of great questions that were compiled by Neve and Adarsh that I think many of you maybe submitted. Many of those things we're going to cover in the presentation today, but also we're going to have a great opportunity to have this interactive. Because if I'm talking the whole time, that's kind of boring. I'd rather be engaging with you and actually address the questions that you have top of mind and actually go through some real examples. So I do have, to the committee, I do have some people that I might utilize as real profiles, but if anyone wants to go through and shout out your name, I'll actually go through your profile and give you some tips and tricks in real time to actually update and improve your profile. So with that, the other thing you could do is feel free to connect with me. We can stay connected as you're listening to the conversation. You could use the hashtag #BestWithBrian. That's one way I know that, hey, there's engagement. People found value out of it. So if you want to do it afterwards or take pictures, feel free to throughout the conversation. So let's get started. First, shout out to Adarsh and Neve because they made all this happen. When you think about LinkedIn and networking, a former Microsoft employee who knew Neve from Rockland actually made this connection. And so we started this, what was it, December I think it was around December timeframe, the connection started, and Neve was the one that reached out and said, hey, Brian, and I think it was both Neve and Adarsh, and they asked, hey, is there an opportunity for you to speak at UC Berkeley? I'm like, absolutely. So going back and forth and trying to figure out the right time, we settled on today, which is April 19th. So big shout out. If you don't know either of them, definitely connect with them. And I understand that there's a, what do you call it, a voting thing that's happening. So if you like this, Adarsh is your man, because he, along with me, created this great opportunity for me to share some of these insights with you today. Okay, so I'm going to date myself because I don't think anyone in this room was probably born in 1996. Is that a fair assumption? Yeah, probably. Which is kind of weird because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. And when you think about it, that's when I graduated from my undergraduate degree. So how many people are from Washington? Anyone from Washington in here? I know there's one person from Oregon, but anyone from Washington? Okay. So University of Puget Sound, how many people have heard of University of Puget Sound? Great. Yeah, a few people. So it's a liberal arts school just south of Seattle in Tacoma, Washington. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, which Kevin, it was funny, during lunch, I met him, and it was so crazy because we actually went to the same high school. Granted, I graduated from high school in 1992, so I'm really dating myself. But when I was going around the room during lunch and just talking to the people in the committee, like, hey, where are you from? What are you graduating? What's your degree in? Commonalities, and you're going to learn that throughout the session. The one thing about creating networking and relationships is find commonalities with people. I know that there's a lot of fraternity people that are even at Darsh's fraternity. I was Sigma Chi. I have a ring. People notice that on planes, etc. It's a great networking opportunity. You always want to find commonalities in the conversation. So my journey started in 1996, and the crazy thing is, you think about phones, like everyone has a phone. That did not exist, and I know that's crazy to say. We did not have mobile phones back then. We didn't have smartphones. As you go through the cycle, these are all the companies I work for. I bounced around a lot before I settled at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft now over 15 years, which is crazy to think. I'm like, 15 years, that's a long time to be at a single company. But I love it because there's so much opportunity to be doing things, and it creates the opportunity for me to learn a lot of new stuff in a single company and get exposed to a lot of different things. So I have a wonderful wife, 2 kids. I met my wife actually at the same college, so she was a few years younger than me. Then in college, I have 2 daughters. We have a golden retriever. I've talked about LinkedIn in many different forums. I actually was asked to speak at a LinkedIn event way back when in Las Vegas. So that was me on that second picture speaking in front of a crowd of 5,000 plus people, talking about how did Microsoft utilize LinkedIn, not for students, but more for selling, because I've always been in a selling type of role. It was weird to present on this topic because I was mentioning to Adarsh and Neve that I've actually done this in a few other universities. But the weird thing is, like, well, if I'm going to do this for other universities, I might as well do this for my own alma mater. So I've done it a few times. It's weird to walk on campus. And that was a picture of me where my picture was all over campus. I'm like, that's super weird. Where I walked this campus like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and seeing my face and delivering this message to help students like yourself, because I was sitting in your shoes, granted, over 25 years ago, but I was sitting in your shoes wondering, well, is this even worth it? Should I care? If you want to get a job and be successful and have high probability to get a job, you want to care. And then the other thing is like a pinnacle of my job opportunity. Anyone know who that person is on the bottom right? The picture of the person I'm right next to. Anyone know who that is? It's Satya Nadella. Anyone know who Satya Nadella is? CEO of Microsoft. So a couple years ago, I was fortunate enough and very grateful that I was recognized to actually win an award, partly because of the stuff I was doing with LinkedIn. Not for students, but more of how we integrated, as Neve articulated, how we integrated LinkedIn, particularly Sales Navigator, with our business application and software product called Dynamics. So when you think about 2002, anyone know what the significant date of 2002 is? That's when LinkedIn was founded. So you guys have an amazing capability and tool to network and build professional networks throughout the process, and I can tell you how you do that. Okay, so you think about the world. What's crazy about the world is, and I was just speaking with Neve and Adarsh over lunch, how competitive the marketplace is. And you see that with if you've heard the term the Great Resignation, now that we're past COVID, or hopefully, knock on wood, that we're getting out of it, you're seeing a lot of people move around, and people are moving around because they're getting job offers left and right to go with their skills, to take their skills to another company. So competition is high. Skill sets, people are literally looking for, because you're in the Bay Area, you can imagine all the tech companies that are based here. Skills, communicate, not just technology, but communication skills, being able to be comfortable and doing what I'm doing right now and speaking in front of an audience of people you don't know. Being able to, and have it live stream, have people actually watching you and looking at the camera and going, okay, there's this guy randomly talking about something live on LinkedIn. It's those types of skills that will set you apart. And then disruption. You think about COVID, hopefully this is not the new norm. I'm sure many of you, because I know some of you are freshmen, some of you are sophomores. I can't imagine what you guys went through to do remote learning in college for like months. It just blows my mind that you were able to go do that. And when you think about what's happening now, it's a whole hybrid approach. We're all used to being on a laptop with a camera, utilizing Teams, Zoom, or some other capability and going to do that. And it's no different when you are looking for jobs, trying to network with people, because you won't always have the opportunity to meet people face to face like what we're doing right now. LinkedIn creates that great opportunity where you can create that digital connection and keep it over the lifetime. So when you meet people, especially face to face, the one thing I was sharing to some people just before the conversation, you should be utilizing that and connecting with people, especially people in this room. I know some of you probably know a lot of people sitting in this room. Think about, are you connected with them on LinkedIn? And if you're not, you should, because you never know when any of their connections, as you get older and you graduate and you start doing your own thing. I stay in contact with a lot of people from high school and lots of people from college I'm still connected to on LinkedIn, because I pay attention to what they're doing, and if there's something that gives me an opportunity to engage because of where they work or what they're doing for mentorships or whatever it is, I have that opportunity because I'm connected to them digitally on LinkedIn. Okay, so when you think about places that jumpstart your career, as we talk about with all these social platforms, there's a lot of social platforms out there. One's for personal life and one's for professional life. What I would say on the right-hand side is that LinkedIn is not just for professional life. I also consider it personal too. Because for some of you, I know Adarsh and Eva recently connected with me. I share things about myself personally because I want people, if they're going to engage with me on a business level, I want them to get to know me on a personal level. So a lot of people know about my family. I talk about what my kids are doing. I occasionally post pictures of my family because I want people to know me as a person. I'm not just this robot that works at a company, a software company. I'm actually a real person that cares about certain things. So we're going to use donuts. How many people like donuts? All right, thank you. I love donuts. It's not healthy for me, but I love donuts. So you think about donuts, I'm gonna use an example, and you probably look at all these icons. They're all social icons that you've probably been exposed to. I don't have TikTok on here, but I would put TikTok kind of everywhere Snapchat. So if you're selling donuts on social media, Facebook, I like donuts. If it was Snapchat or even TikTok, watch me eat a donut. Instagram, here's a cool photo of my donut. If I'm on Pinterest, I don't know, probably not a lot of people use Pinterest. My wife does a lot. Here's a donut recipe. If you're listening to Spotify, I'm listening to donuts, or WhatsApp, if you have WhatsApp, anyone want a donut. Is that resonating with people? Okay, good. I'm seeing some shaking their heads. So you think about donuts on LinkedIn, what's that pivot? What's the difference? Well, the difference is certain things that are professionally out there to talk about your skills about making donuts, or you hope to operate a donut franchise one day. I know that's an extreme example, but it gives you hopefully this pivot point as to why LinkedIn is important. I would say one of the things that you can do, especially even if you're a freshman, it's never too early to start utilizing LinkedIn, because you want to build your professional network. So when you graduate, you're not scrambling for a job. You actually have lined things up because you've built that professional connect with people that you can engage with. Okay, so for students, what's in it for you? It's connections. If you've ever heard the term your network is how you succeed, it is, I can say firsthand, and I've talked with a lot of people too, it is truly the case. Getting promoted, finding new jobs, getting connected with people, your network is super, super important. The second is, because I know we have a lot of finance people in here, I got this wave of insight. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go back to school because all these finance people are talking about stuff that I've never been exposed to before. But it's a way to stay informed, because the secret superpower for you to be successful in the job market is to stay on top of what's actually happening in whatever industry. If you're a lawyer, if you're in tech, if you're in finance, if you are whatever other degrees you have in here, you want to stay connected to what's actually happening in the industry, or with the people that, or like the senior leaders at companies you want to work for, because that is your ticket to having an engaging conversation when you're actually talking with a recruiter, because then you're proving to the recruiter you actually know a ton about the company and you have a point of view. You have a unique point of view. And then it allows you to get hired, because it gives you, again, I don't guarantee anything, but I give you high probability. If you do some of the things I'm talking about in the session today, it's going to give you a higher probability to engage and succeed. Okay. So you might have seen at the very beginning of the screenshot, that screenshot was a little outdated. I couldn't find the latest one, but there's over 740 million members, what LinkedIn calls members. So I know many of you in this room, hopefully everyone in this room, how many people have a LinkedIn profile? Good. I think that's everybody. That's fantastic. You're part of the 740 million member community. And the reason why that's important is because that builds your network of whatever company you want to work for. I guarantee there's someone sitting in this room that there's a connection, bless you, a connection or commonality that you can tap into and leverage to get the right connection to find that right job. There's over 30 million companies that have LinkedIn company pages. That's super important because it shows, A, what the company's about, because you can go to their website, but when they post things on their LinkedIn company page, that gives you some insight in real time as to what actually is happening. So for example, I'm going to showcase potentially Sid in the dialogue later when I showcase a real LinkedIn profile. But when I asked him at lunch today what company he wants to work for, what's his ideal company, he said Goldman Sachs. So when I looked at his profile, guess who he's following on his LinkedIn profile? Goldman Sachs. I don't know, I didn't tell you that, Sid, I'm just telling you that in real time. Because as a manager, let's say I worked at Goldman Sachs. One of the things I always look for, so when I interview people that want to work for Microsoft, one of the first things I look at is if they're really passionate about Microsoft, I would see a couple things on their profile. One, I would see that they're probably following some senior leader at Microsoft, like even Satya. I don't care if it's me. If they're following some senior leader at Microsoft, that tells me, okay, they're paying attention. Two, they're following the company page because they're paying attention to all the stuff that they're talking about. And three, when I look at maybe what they're talking about or what's on their profile, they're talking about things that are financial, in Sid's case, financially related. That gives me some insight about, I don't know him, I don't know Sid at all, I just met him today. But it gives me some insight as to what he cares about and what may set himself apart over other people. And so if we do show his profile, I'll show you some of the best practices that I saw in his profile without even talking to him that all of you should consider as you build out your profile. Okay, so how do you do that? Because before we talk about anything on LinkedIn, the number one thing I always tell people, it starts with the profile. Your brand of how you represent yourself. So anyone you're connected with, the one thing that typically happens is when you meet people for the first time, especially as you graduate, the first thing you're typically going to do is you're going to type in someone's name. You're going to type in Neve and you're going to say, okay, who's Neve? Or who's Adarsh? Or who's Sid? Or who's Ava? Or whoever it is. It's going to give you that opportunity to see who they are. And if that's incomplete or if it doesn't give what you want to say, it creates a challenge in the conversation because you're not great. You may never ever get an opportunity to talk to someone. That first opportunity when someone looks at your profile is that window to determine that they want to continue to have a conversation with you or potentially reach out to have a conversation. Okay, so this should be obvious, but 9 out of 10 recruiters, I would assume 10 out of 10, I'm pretty confident, but 9 out of 10 recruiters utilize LinkedIn. They do because this is a professional network. They just look at someone's profile and go, okay, is this someone that I actually want to have a conversation with? It's a screen. And how do you get a recruiter's retention? And I'm going to talk about this in real time because I'm not just going to do slides. I'm actually going to show some stuff in real time. Your education, you're graduating from an amazing university. My wife, I didn't share this, but my wife's actually from the Bay Area. She grew up in Piedmont. And so we would drive down here once in a while. And I was like, oh my gosh, when Neve and Adarsh walked me around campus, like it brought back some memories. And like, you go to an amazing school. You go to a Pac-12 school. And I think I saw on Twitter, like it's one of the #1 rated schools for some certain types of things. should leverage that. And so it should be front and center because you're students. You should be highlighting the fact that you actually are graduating from UC Berkeley with whatever type of degree you plan to graduate with. And I'm going to show some examples of what you put there. The second is you want to have professional photos. So Adarsh and Neve, it's great that they were able to get a professional photographer, because the one thing that would be weird is that when you go to someone's profile, and I'm sure you may have seen some, and it's blank, it has like the question mark or it's kind of anonymous. It's the same example of if I was to walk in this hall today and actually speaking with you with a paper bag on my head, which I know some of you are smiling, oh, that's kind of weird. That's the experience you're giving to someone if you don't have a professional picture. Or if you have a picture, but it's one of those pictures that isn't professional, meaning that it's kind of, cropped out, or you're at a party and you may have a beer in your hand, because I've seen that before. I'm like, that's not the type of photo you want to use. That might be a photo you might want to use on your Snapchat or on your Instagram, but on LinkedIn, you want to show that you're actually a professional. Experience. And some people go, well, Brian, I'm just a student. What type of experience can I actually put on there? Well, one, internships, or maybe you have a job on campus, because I did that. I was the actual tour guide at my university for the first couple of years. You guys should put that there. And that showcases to a recruiter that you actually have capabilities to talk to people, or communication, or show certain skills. Or maybe you work at Starbucks or Target or whatever it is as a part-time job. You want to put that there because it shows that you actually have certain skill sets you're building. Volunteerism. I think, because I know a lot of you are so involved. That's one of the amazing things from just getting to know some of the committee members earlier today. You guys are so involved. You should promote that. You should talk about the things that you're involved with, that you care about, because one of the things that happens is it goes back into the commonalities. Because whether you're in a sorority, in a fraternity, if you use your time for some type of nonprofit cause, there's going to be some potential connection with a recruiter or a hiring manager, because they're going to see some commonality and go, wait a second, I did that exact same thing when I was in college. It creates that commonality. And then skills, we're going to talk about skills, because one of the things that you can do, especially as students, is get your professors or get your peers. If you're finance, and again, I'm using finance because I know we have a lot of finance people in here. If you do really well in one of your classes, ask your professor, hey, professor, could you endorse me on finance? Like, just put it's not like a summary of something. It's basically just saying on LinkedIn, I know that Adarsh is competent in finance. That goes a long way, because guess what happens? If he applies to Blackstone or Goldman Sachs or one of the names, because I know we're talking about what companies that you potentially want to work for. If all of a sudden the recruiter or hiring manager sees that, wow, there's like 40 people that have endorsed him for finance, and he just graduated, that starts to prompt really positive questions, because like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people that have witnessed or observed that this person's competent in this specific skill. And it doesn't have to be finance. It could be legal. It could be technology or whatever it is. And I'd like to know like what other degrees we have in this room, because I want to make sure it's relevant to each of you. So we're going to talk about education, like education foundation to putting that on there. And over time, I still put my year I graduated just so that people can find me. But it's so important to put the year you're graduating. And I'll show this potential with Sid, is because you want people to know, especially recruiters or hiring managers, to know when you actually would be available for a full-time position. Because if you leave it blank, then someone doesn't know, should I be recruiting you for an internship? Should I be recruiting you for a full-time job? Always put your year, and also gives you an opportunity to kind of identify other, like over time, especially when you get early in your career. Let's say you graduate in 5 years from now, you can make connections to people who graduated your same year. Because I know UC Berkeley, unlike my university, much bigger. So you have the ability to then connect with people your same year that you may not have met at campus because they're not in the hospital business or not part of your circle. But over time, you could actually connect with someone going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that person went to UC Berkeley at the same time I did. Photo, and we talked about that. There's going to be a professional photographer later today. Use that photo. If you don't have one today, or maybe you have one and it was taken a few years ago, I always find professional photos every once in a while that are refreshed is really good. And when you get a professional photographer taking photos, take advantage of it. Because you always want to showcase the fact that sometimes people have old photos from like 5 years ago, and then you meet someone in person going, oh my gosh, you don't look like anything like you have on your profile. That's happened. People with beards, or people who shave, or people with glasses or no glasses, etc. You always want to have a recent photo in a way to represent yourself. Experience. And again, I talked about like, it doesn't have to be like a full-time job, it could be internships, could be volunteer type of things that you do in your clubs. Super important to do that because again, it shows that you're actually involved and then shows commonality potentially with people that you might want to connect with. We talked about volunteer experience. I think it's super important because if you're spending time on something, it's good to actually talk about it with, showcase that with people. And then of course, skills, not just technology skills, but languages. I'm sure there's people in this room that speak more than just English. That is super important because that will say, I don't speak another language, but I'm sure other people in this room probably do, whether it be French, Spanish, German, Japanese, Chinese, whatever it is. Make sure you put, some students don't put it there. And it's important to because it sets yourself apart from other people. Okay, so I have a few more slides and then I'm gonna get to pause and see if there's any initial questions, and then I'm gonna go into some real-time stuff on LinkedIn Live. So we know like your to-do list is pretty overwhelming. Again, I'm probably missing a whole bunch of stuff. I think sleep is one that I can remember back in the day for when you're cramming for classes and all that stuff, or just having fun and having a social life. But it always being top of mind to think about, again, for all those freshmen in the room going, okay, why should I care about this? You want to start early because you'll have the opportunity, you'll set yourself apart because imagine all the other students that may go to Stanford, may go to Oregon, may go to Washington, etc. If you're trying to apply for a job, you're competing with all these other students that are vying for that. And I was talking with the Darshani, like some of the finance jobs that are out there, it's like one student out of 100 would get it. So it's never too early to actually start. And part of it that just starts is having a network, having a profile, and then creating that network over time. So I'm going to talk about this. How many people know about this alumni page on the university UC Berkeley thing? Some people, I saw one person right there, and a few people have. I'm going to go to it, but it's just linkedin.com/alumni. If I know some people have your laptops open. If you're on the web and you just type in linkedin.com/alumni, because if you have UC Berkeley tied to your profile, it's going to go to the UC Berkeley alumni page. I'm going to talk about like what this looks like. There's 652,000 alumni on LinkedIn. That's a lot. Anyone want to hazard a guess who's the top employer outside of UC Berkeley? Anyone want to hazard a guess who's the top employer of where students go? Go ahead. No. That's a good. They're now called Meta, but yes, they're in the top. I think they're in the top 10. Anyone have another guess? I'll say they're in the Bay Area. Go ahead. No, that's a good. Thank you. I'll give you a prize for saying that, but no, it is not Microsoft. I thought it might be, but it's not. Go ahead. I'm sorry. It is that is the number one, but outside the university, what is the other? They're based in the Bay Area. Go ahead. Yes, bingo. It was. I guess it shouldn't have surprised me, but that is the number one employer. And then some of the other ones you mentioned are on top, and I'll show you that and what that looks like. I'm not going to call people out because Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, I did a couple. There are hundreds of employees that work at those companies, or other ones that you might want to look at and talk about. And the great thing about this is free. So I know as students, sometimes cash is tight. I'm not trying to advocate that you pay for a LinkedIn premium subscription because you can pay for LinkedIn. There's some certain benefits from it. But the things, everything I'm talking about here, it's all free. It's all stuff that you can just utilize for free if you take advantage of it. So this shouldn't surprise anybody, but referrals is a great way to actually find a job. Because if you want to work for Google, Meta, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, etc., one of the best ways to get introduced to the hiring managers is to utilize referrals. Because you can imagine if you're a student, back in the day, I would go in and submit my resume and who knows where that went, because it would just go through this database and you don't know where it goes. If you had someone that could actually make a connection for you and send a note to say, oh, you know what, I know the hiring manager, let me make that connection. You're already far enough along to all the other students because now you have the inside track because you're leveraging someone in the network. And most likely it's maybe alumni. That's part of the connection that how I got connected at Microsoft. I leveraged the network of University of Puget Sound graduates who actually worked at Microsoft to get me connected to the right hiring managers to eventually work there. To have the job, well, not have the job I have now, but get into the door and understand how do I actually navigate and get in front of the right people to actually have that opportunity. So these are examples, and you're going to have this deck. I'm going to have a link at the end where you have this deck, because people ask me, hey, Brian, what type of, and I was looking at some of the questions that were submitted. One of the questions was, what type of examples, how would I do reach out? Like, what would I actually say? And so when you connect with people, the one thing that I would impress on you guys too is that when you connect with people on LinkedIn, always personalize the connection. I was mentioning this to Ava a little bit. So a couple of tricks is that on your mobile device, hopefully everyone has LinkedIn on their mobile device. I know some people may not have the storage for it, but when you get closer to actually finding opportunities, you always want to have LinkedIn on there, because it's always great to quickly look at someone's name in real time and see what they do. Or if you meet someone, you start talking to them in a let's say a networking session. I don't hand out business cards anymore. I just connect with people on LinkedIn. If they find value and they go, oh, that's interesting, I want to stay connected with you, I'll pull up my LinkedIn, I pull up my QR code, and I'll talk about that. And then I connected with them in real time, so that now they're digitally connected with me. So they have my contact information, because once you're connected with me, you have all my contact information is unlocked on my profile. And going back into the personalized connection, it's always good to personalize the connection, because if someone just sent me a connection request, if you did, anyone who just does that today, that's okay, because if it says you're from Cal, I'll know that you're probably in this room. But in other events that I've done presentations at, I'm like, where did I meet this person? And I kind of ignore, unfortunately, it's no offense to them, I just ignore it, because I'm like, I don't know where the connection is. I know one of the questions was, hey, how do I accept connections from everybody? I actually don't. I keep my connection space pretty tight. So if you look at my profile, I have over 7,000 connections, or 7,000 followers. And people think, oh, that's 7,000 connections, that's 7,000 people I know. That's actually not the case. I actually know or connected to about a little less than half, about 3,000 of them actually are true connections. 4,000 are people who just follow me because they just pay attention to the stuff I post, which is good, because you want to build that brand, that personal connection. But it's super important that when you want to potentially reach out to some person at an organization, or even as you network here, always take the time, even a few words, to say, hey, thank you for the time, love to stay digitally connected. Something as simple as that, because it says, wow, you appreciated the connection, but you also relate it back to where you're making that connection itself. Another, and we're going to talk about this for alumni stuff, is tap the connections for alumni help. Utilize that UC Berkeley alumni page to actually make the connections to alumni in industries or locations or jobs that you actually want to go after. One of the things that I've done when I've spoken at other universities is say, hey, Brian, I don't know what company I want to work for. I just know I want to work in Hawaii. I'm like, okay, fantastic. Did you know you actually can just look up a country or a state and say, who are all the alumni from blah, blah, blah university that live in that city or that country? You can do that. And it's amazing, because I type in Hawaii and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a ton of people that show up, and you can see all the companies they work for. Once you start looking for jobs, internships, or again, jobs, utilize the LinkedIn company page of that employer to start looking at, okay, what do they talk about? What are they posting? What's the job? And start looking at job descriptions. Start looking at who works there, maybe some commonality. So as you build your network, you'll be able to understand and start to see, okay, who works there that might be in your network, or someone that can make an introduction to someone in that connection. And then the last would be just setting up job alerts. So when you're on LinkedIn, and you can do this now just for curiosity, you can actually say, okay, this is the type of job I would love to, as my dream company. Just put a search, or not even dream company, just say, hey, this is the type of skill or type of role I'd love to take. Create a job search so that you get LinkedIn to feed you opportunities, so you can get an understanding of what are companies looking for, so that, let's say 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 1 year from now, when you're going to graduate, you already know the types of skills or the types of roles that are out there that will make you align to better promote yourself into a job opportunity. Mentioned this with Sid, but you want to follow the company. So if your ideal job is to work at whatever company it is, follow the company, follow the senior leader, because most likely that CEO, that CFO, that chief revenue officer, that VP of whatever, high probability they have a LinkedIn profile. I'd be shocked if they didn't. So being able to follow the companies and follow the influencers in that industry or in that company, so you could just pay attention to what's happening, whether it be finance, legal, or whatever related to the industry. And then talk about, when I mentioned industries, follow hashtags. So if you care about, let's say, finance, there's like 1 million followers of finance, the hashtag finance. So you can just stay visible and understand, okay, what are people talking about? Are they talking about Bitcoin? Are they talking about, we had a dialogue about GameStop, like stuff like that, because it gets you in the know, so that when you have conversations with people to set yourself up for job conversations, you can actually say, oh, by the way, here's my point of view on what just happened in your industry. Me as a manager, I love that type of stuff, because then it shows me that that person's done the research. That person is actually informing me of something I didn't even know in my industry. And when you can provide value to a person without being asked for it, and it shows that you're insightful, that starts to set yourself apart over other people applying for that same role. I would also say join relevant groups. There are a ton of groups. I just looked on LinkedIn. Like the UC Berkeley Alumni has 21,000 members on it. You can just see what people are talking about. Just say, you could join it, like even if you're not alumni, you could just, I'm pretty sure, like University of Puget Sound, for students, I encourage them to join the alumni page just to say, what are alumni talking about? So they get a sense for what people, what they're being talked about. And then also who's posting, because if you're like, oh, that person works at company so-and-so. If you engage in their content and say, hey, by the way, can I reach out to you about someone's whatever they're talking about? Most likely they'll want to have a conversation with you or engage, because it shows that you actually care about what they're posting. Okay, so let me go to real-time stuff and answer. Does anyone have any questions so far of what I just talked about? No? Okay, so I'm going to go into some real-time things on LinkedIn. And thanks, because I just know that people are connected with me, because I can see the little tag, because I cleared it out before I started, and it looks like there's 3 people that are actually connected with me. So when you think about starting out, the one thing about your profile, and then I'm going to show a couple of tips, and I talked about it a little bit, but you're going to notice a couple things. One is, see how the video popped up? Some people who connected with me already have mentioned that and go, oh my gosh, that sets yourself apart. It does. And the thing when you look at a profile, it's kind of like when you go to a website, when you do a search on Bing or Google or whatever it is, the relevancy comes up because you may not click on something to go deeper if it doesn't add value. And I call that, like if you're anyone who takes marketing, you'll hear the term above the fold. So what that means is that when you're looking at something on a mobile device or on a desktop like this, or my Surface device, you're not going to scroll down. Notice that this is all I see when I go, like if you went to my profile right now, I know some of you are probably looking at my profile. You're not going to see very much other than you're just going to see this. So the thing I always anchor students on is that you want to make sure that this is compelling enough for someone to scroll down and do more. And how does that someone catch attention? 1, professional picture. 2, a picture with a background. And so if you look at Sid and Ava and some other your peers are sitting in this room, I'm impressed because they already have a UC Berkeley thing on the back, which is good because that indicates that you're a student here. You can, it's up to you what you want to use. My one guidance though is don't just leave it blank, because you want to have as much personalization on this as possible to show that you actually, what are your passions or what are the things you care about. And this always creates a conversation because, again, you saw this picture in the earlier slides. I get a lot of people talking about, oh, where was that taken? Because it looks like you're presenting at LinkedIn. One of the reasons why I get side gigs like I do with this, with presentations, because like if I ever retire from Microsoft, this is what I want to do. I want to do public speaking on stuff like this. And I do that because people realize, oh my gosh, that looks like a large audience. It was 5,000 plus people. So it creates conversation. So the things that you can start to set yourself apart is 1, having those things. And then if you want to get like the level 400, like the super advanced LinkedIn class or LinkedIn capabilities, you can then do the video. So a couple things. One is that how you do that. If you there's an option here that says view profile video. So I'm gonna play this so you can actually see if you haven't seen it before what actually.
My team and I at Microsoft help partners and ISVs grow their revenue on line of business applications built on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. If that sounds like something your organization would like help with, feel free to connect with me and follow the hashtag ISVConnect. You can also follow me for daily posts on Microsoft, CRM, ERP, and using LinkedIn to drive your initiatives. Appreciate the connection.
So something as simple as that gets someone's attention because one, they visually see me, they hear me. And and especially as a student, if you can set yourself apart, that's kind of like when you think about cover letters, I'm sure that people talk about it. That's a digital cover letter. It gives someone an opportunity without even talking to you. One, it shows that one, you actually can communicate. I know that might be a weird thing to say, but that is such an important skill set to be able to communicate ideas and be comfortable in having a conversation, because that in the business world, I don't know about other industries, but in tech, super important. If you can't communicate ideas through words and through verbal communication, unless you're a developer, like if you're sitting in the back room, just like, here's the thing, go develop it, it's different. But I would still argue the fact that you still have to communicate pretty well on, especially when you want to grow the ranks and get into senior leader positions in any company. Communicating to executives in ideas and being simplistic and communicating the right altitude is so important. Another thing is that there's this pronunciation thing, and I'll show you where you do that. So some people utilize this if you have a very complex name. I don't have a complex name. Well, my last name, not a lot of people get it correct. Some people's weird things, like my nickname in college was Battlestar. And you probably like, what the hell? What's that, Brian? Does anyone remember the show Battlestar Galactica? Any sci-fi people out there? Okay, I seen some not in the heads. So that was a show way back when. It was even before I was born. So Galicia, for some reason, I don't know why people say Galactica, but people would say that. And so the nickname I got in college was, it was Battlestar. So anyway, I'm only saying that because people use the pronunciation. If you have a complex last name, people use that. But if I'll share mine, because if you do this.
Hi, this is Brian Galicia. If you are an ISV looking to grow your revenue with Dynamics 365, I invite you to learn more in the blog section. Thanks.
So it's a 10-second clip that gives you, again, another opportunity to not just talk about your name, but actually say something. And so you can say, hey, I'm Neve. I'm currently a student of data and economic. Again, I'm butchering it, but you get the idea. Data and economic major that graduates in 2025. Love an opportunity to have a conversation about opportunities in finance. Something as simple as that will set yourself apart, because when a recruiter goes to your profile, compared to any other student, guess what happens? They're going to click on that. They might click on it and go, oh my gosh. They're starting to get to know you in ways not just written, because they hear your voice. So they go, okay, that's a real person. And then if you add a video on top of that, then they not just see a picture, then they can see you visually having a conversation. And it's kind of like an informal promptu interview, because you're showing them that you can communicate well and you can articulate a quick value statement in a short period of time. Another thing that I would say too is that this headline is super important, because it can allow you to say that you're a student at UC Berkeley with the emphasis in whatever, finance, legal, tech, whatever it is, and also comment the fact that you are class of blah, 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 class of 23, class of 25, or whatever it is. Because that's a headline. If a recruiter is trying to hunt for someone that they want to recruit for when someone's graduating, they don't have to scroll down and figure out, oh, when is this person graduating? And they have to scroll all the way to the bottom. You actually are saying that in written form on the headline, but you're also talking about that potentially in a video in the audio component. Is this making sense so far? Okay. The other thing too is at the very top, see how I have this personalized URL? This is super important, because as you make presentations, or even on your traditional resume, and don't get me wrong, you still want to have a resume. At the very top, you actually want to put your LinkedIn URL there, so it makes it super simple, because if you have a common name like John Smith, there's thousands of John Smiths out there, and how are you going to be found? One of the easiest ways is that if you have a personalized URL there, you can put your personalized LinkedIn URL there to go add that to different types of things. And you probably notice, like, I have my picture and my LinkedIn profile on the initial slide, because if anyone looks at the slides after the fact or comes across it, for people not even in this room, they immediately know, okay, oh, Brian actually delivered this presentation. This is what he looks like. And then it's an easy way for someone to go to my profile, because they don't have to type in the name. Well, they'll still type in the name, but they just type in the actual URL and go to it. So how do you do this, all this type of stuff? So when you're in your LinkedIn profile, like if you have a whole bunch of numbers and symbols on your LinkedIn profile, the way to change that is on edit public profile and URL. It's just right here. And if you have a common name, that's tough because it's probably taken by now. But if you don't, I would just, my typical recommendation is use first name, last name. It's very easy. Or if you have something in other link, or like, let's say Twitter. How many people have Twitter handles? Okay, a few people. I would also encourage you to create a Twitter handle too. Partly because you want to stay connected on news, and Twitter is like my news feed. Like if something's happening in the world, I find out about it because I see it on Twitter. But one of the things I encourage people to do is you want to have, because Twitter I view as it's also kind of a professional engagement as well. If you're going to use a handle like first name, last name, be consistent on other professional social handles. So to try to utilize, if your Twitter handle is first name, last name, try to grab the same one on LinkedIn so that when someone looks for you, they know, oh, it's the same handle, Brian Galicia. It's on same on Twitter, same on LinkedIn. The other places, as I mentioned, when you want to change your profile video, if you click on your picture or update, so whenever, as soon as you get your professional picture taken later today, take the time sometime, either today or during this week, upload it so you actually have it on your site. Then, again, this is not something you just do quickly. You want to think about what type of video would you want to do in a spot somewhere where you have a tripod or some camera that isn't like moving around. You want to have it be very stable, and practice kind of what Neve was doing initially as he did the intro. Practice what you want to say. And if you want to create a video, I encourage everyone to get to that point, because it's a good mechanism to actually engage. The other thing that I would encourage you guys to do is when you get to a point, especially during the summer or places when you want to do an internship, there's the ability to, and you might have seen this on people's profiles. Have people seen this on people's profiles before open to work? That's useful to have because it gives a hiring manager, recruiter, and immediate acknowledgement the fact that this person, you, are actually open to conversations and you're actually looking for jobs. Because it's a simple way, because they visually see that. And then when you find a job, you can actually take it away. It's pretty easy to take away. Or eventually, when you ever get to a point, if you're managing people, like I do, if you're hiring people, that's when I switch over to this so people know that I'm actually hiring. And when you're researching people, this is good to look for, because if you're trying to connect with someone and you see that tag, that's good. That means that maybe you can be in front of them and be a candidate for the jobs that they're probably hiring for, because that's your indication that a hiring manager at a company is actually hiring. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. It's a good question. I always say that if you haven't met someone face-to-face in person yet, always create that commonality. If there's something that you want to reach out to because you're creating that connection, send a message. If you don't know exactly what you would say or don't know how to engage yet, there's an opportunity, and I can't do it here because this is me. You can follow someone. It's kind of like what I was mentioning, like you follow influencers, etc. Without connecting to them, there's an opportunity to say follow. And by following them, it starts to show up in your feed, because then you start to get notifications, you get awareness to what they're posting and what they're engaging on. Because as soon as you start to see, and I'll scroll down at the bottom, see all this activity. I typically post frequently. I was on vacation last week, so I was a little off my game because I didn't want to be on vacation posting stuff on LinkedIn. But when you look at stuff on someone's profile, it's super important to see what they're talking about, because that's your in on conversation or capability. So to your question, like typically someone who has that hiring flag on it, somewhere in their activity feed, they're talking about the job they're actually hiring for. And that could be your opportunity to actually create that connection, saying, hey, we never met before, but here's where we're connected or the commonalities. Are you open to having a conversation about this role that you're posted in? And here's how I potentially would be a fit. Are you open for a connection and conversation? Again, I'm making this stuff up. You have to play around with what works for you, but something that's concise to say, it can't just be, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a job. It has to be, what's the commonality? Why would I want to go talk to you? Being grateful for that conversation and not assuming that they want to talk to you, but just saying, would you be open to a connection or a conversation? And then letting them respond and seeing how they respond and engage. It's not 100% bulletproof. I guarantee, like, even if you send messages out with commonalities, you may not get a response. And that's okay. Don't take offense to that because people are busy. Or they're like, oh, no, I already moved on. You're not the right profile and they don't respond. And that's okay. Just move on to someone who would engage with you. Does that answer your question? Is that good? Okay, cool. Yeah, great. Okay, so then the other things that I think are super relevant, super important is that you also start to see, it's always interesting when you start using LinkedIn. And again, I'm talking about things that are like 400 level type of stuff. I'll go back to basic stuff. But there's a lot of analytics that can show you different things. So one is that you can start to see who's looking at your profile. So I've never met, oh, Peter, I didn't meet Peter, he's right there. So Luan, who's somewhere in here, I think I've seen her, yeah, right there. Yeah, that's great, because that shows me you actually looked at my profile. And that's good, because if you're a hiring manager and you're kind of like, okay, this person's reached out to me, have they even looked at what I do? I look at this because it gives me some indication like someone's doing their research, which is good. It doesn't mean to say you're going to reach out to me. It just gives me some indication that someone's looking at your profile. And reverse it. Let's say you're the student. Imagine you saw someone that says someone at Goldman Sachs, like you said. I'm always going to say, because I think Sid has a really good example when I show his. Someone at Goldman Sachs looked at his profile. That's your indication that whatever you've been doing is working. Because someone at the company that you would love to work for actually looked at your profile, which is a good thing. You want that to happen. And depending on their privacy settings, because sometimes they're going to show up anonymously, and that's okay. Like if you want, there's settings in the privacy to say you don't want to share that you're looking at other people's profiles. That's okay. But when you start actively doing engagement, I always tell people you probably, my preference, my recommendation is you actually want to say that you're public. Because you want people to know, like if someone is Goldman Sachs, you want them to know that you're looking at their profile. Or that you want them to know, yeah, the other way around. That this student who's applying for this job is looking at the profile of this hiring manager. Okay, and then the other things you can consider doing too is thinking about posting and connect, or not just connecting, but posting stuff. Because similar, like think about all this stuff, like I'm sure, like I have a teenager, I have a 15-year-old. She's on stories of Instagram all the time. It's like clockwork. Almost every few days, she's posting a story. Imagine doing that in your professional life. And why would you want to do that? It's because it's starting to show, if you're in finance, and again, I'm only doing finance because I've met a whole bunch of people that that want to go into finance. Imagine your feed is about stuff that talks about your point of view on finance. Someone at Goldman Sachs or Blackstone or some company is going to look at that going, wow, this person gets it. This person seems like they are on top of what's happening in the industry. I'd like to get more of his or her perspective on the conversation. And when you do that, it starts to build this, because I look at, when I'm a hiring manager, I look at and say, what are they posting? What are they talking about? And it's the same thing. If you reverse it, if you start to look at to the question that the lady asked, you start to see what they care about, and you can start to figure out, if you're going to reach out, what type of conversation would you have, because you start to see what they're talking about, what they're posting. You could also, not in a creepy way, I'm not saying you like everything on what someone's doing. I wouldn't do that. If something's really resonating with you, just a simple like or a comment is actually very powerful, because then all of a sudden you're going to draw that person's attention going, oh, who's this Peter person? And then they're going to go to look at your profile. And again, as I mentioned, if you have a really stellar profile, that's going to make you stand out because then they're starting to click on stuff. They're going to start to look at stuff. So that's why it's super important to have it filled out. So you can actually have things featured. So when you post things, like right here, I have a newsletter that I send out every Friday. And that's why I create the combination of personal and professional. That's how people have gotten to know me, like who've never met me before. Because in my newsletter, I always comment, I always have a picture. I look at my phone going, what did I take on my phone that week? And I talk about it. And then I have consistency on the things that what I do at Microsoft that are super valuable to the people that are connected with me or the people that follow me. It's consistent. It's kind of like a newspaper. So they know what you're getting. There's a front page, sports section, comics, et cetera, same concept. So here I would do, if you're a student, I would do the same thing. So let's say one of you, or many of you in this room, you've worked on some amazing presentation, or you were cited publicly something, or you did a presentation of some sort. I would highlight that there because it's a great way for a hiring manager or recruiter to go see that and they go, okay, because again, it's all about how much are they going to scroll down. And you can see here the featured section is the first thing that pops up. So you might as well highlight something that's super relevant. And maybe it's just a resume. Because again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for people who are professionals who have jobs that are like fully in the industry. But for students, you should highlight work that you've done because that's a great way for someone to immediately see it and click on it and look at it. And then the about section is super important. And again, I always go to Sid because I looked at his really quickly. It's a good way for students. You should utilize this because again, besides the video aspect at the very top, this is the compelling statement to say, what are you doing at, or what's your focus at UC Berkeley? What are you interested in? Like what type of job? Like if you ever got offered a job or wanted to be interested in the job, what would you actually want to do? And then how should someone reach out to you? I never met Sid before, but like he must have read something or got some best practices because his about section is pretty spot on when I looked at it. I mean, there's some tweaks I'm going to show. Like I did mention to him over lunch, like he should put his year he's graduating, so it's very clear. But when I show his as an example, it'll start to stand out. But for me, you can see here, I always describe what do I do, how do I help people, and then what's the call to action. It's very simple at the very top. You'd be surprised how many people do this. I could get a lot of emails. I get a lot of people clicking on this link because they pay attention to this because I can help them with something. Turn around as a student, if you clearly say, here's what you're getting your degree in, here's the type of jobs that you actually want to get into, and hey, if you'd like to have a conversation, here's how you get a hold of me. Great. I wouldn't put your cell phone number there. I wouldn't put your address. Like I'm very sensitive, especially for students and women. Like you don't want to have creepy people doing that because it's public. But I would have like your UC Berkeley email or something of how someone can get a hold of you. Very easily. I wouldn't put a phone number there, but I would put like an email. So it's very easy for someone to get in contact with you. So then just scroll down, experiences. I would always figure out, like, especially as you get later in your student life, put things, your part-time jobs, but as you describe what you've done, always talk about outcomes. Because when I look at that, I always talk about what did that person learn or what type of impact did they had at this internship or the company XYZ. So talk about, hey, you were responsible for blah, blah, blah at whatever internship. Here's the outcome. That's super important because it gives someone an understanding of what are the types of things did you do and learn while you were working at that, when you're trying to work at that company. If you have examples like pictures or, again, stuff that you can cite that you did, that's where attachments and those things that you see here become super valuable. I already mentioned education. So you do want to talk about activities. So you can talk. And so of course I'm proud that I was in a fraternity because there's so many commonalities. It is amazing how many times someone looks at my profile and says, hey, Brian, I was a Sigma Chi at blah, blah, blah. It's an icebreaker. Or they were part of the National Business Fraternity. Simple things like that is because I know there's a rower here. Use that because you'd be surprised how many D1 athletes work at companies and they go, oh my gosh, I was a rower at Yale or UW or wherever it is. If you get licensed, I mean, this would be like for Like if you took a bar exam, or maybe in tech you passed a certification, you should be proud of any type of certifications or specific things that you were tested for. You should say that, because depending on what you're applying for, especially if you're in tech, if you can say you're certified in a product or some type of methodology or project or whatever it is, you should put that there. Because people will look at that and go, okay, a job requirement or a nice skill set to have is someone who's certified in whatever product or technology. Putting volunteering stuff, I think, is super important, whether it be church related or stuff nonprofit, etc. You can put there. And this is where I said skills. So at the top, you can see here, I've been endorsed on a numerous amount of skills. So when I'm talking about stuff, I have credibility because immediately someone goes, okay, this guy knows something about CRM or cloud computing or SaaS, because look at the number of people that have endorsed him on. It's not verbal stuff, it's not written stuff like this. It's just someone saying, okay, yeah, I've witnessed or have endorsed that. So feel free to do that with your peers if you can honestly say, oh, okay, yeah, this person is good in finance. Or even better, have your professors do it if they're okay with it. Because then that goes a long way for someone to go, oh my gosh, this person who's a student, look at all the professors that have actually endorsed this person on this skill set because they're the top student in their class. If you can get a recommendation, it's great, because if you have other people talking about yourself, that's great. Because again, it's a reference that's written, as verbal, and someone can go like, oh, what does this person do? They can click on it. This was the university I forgot. So I actually spoke at Baylor University. So I got one of the students, like exactly what Neva Nadar said. They actually commented and said, hey, talked about the power of LinkedIn to over 100 students at Baylor. If you're publicizing, again, this is harder for you guys because you may not have this, but if you have publications or honors and awards, languages, you just want this to be complete. That's my bottom line, is you just want to make sure that it's very personalized. It really provides your 24/7 engagement for people to engage with you. And then as I scroll down, influencers, companies, groups, and I'll show a real example here. Those are the people you actually want to follow, engage, because you want to see what they talk about. So that if you're going to work for company XYZ, you actually say, oh, the CEO did this, and you'd be surprised how many managers go, oh, I didn't know that. And you're bringing value because you're sharing something that that person didn't even know. Okay, any questions? Sorry, go ahead, Ava.
Would you put, if you spoke another language, for example, would
Yep.
you put that in your skills or in your languages?
You could put it in both, but actually in languages is the best place to do it because it's kind of set there. And only we say that you could do it in both places, but languages is good because when recruiters, they can filter, they can do searches on specific things. Let's say they're looking for someone that spoke a specific language. There's what's called LinkedIn recruiting that recruiters use as a tool to find talent. They can actually filter on how many people speak Spanish or French or whatever it is. And they can filter on that in the language section. Okay, so let's go to, I can show Sid, but does anyone want to kind of volunteer and do get a quick analysis of their LinkedIn profile? Otherwise, I can use Sid. Okay, great. Thank you for volunteering. That's fantastic. Let me and go ahead. What's your name? Sorry, S. Sorry, a little slower.
I-S.
Oh, sorry. I-S.
H-I.
H-I.
T-A.
Okay.
N.
N.
A. M. J-O.
Oh, there, you're right here. Great. Fantastic. So a couple things. Ashita, is that how you pronounce your name? Great. So a couple things that catch my attention. One, professional picture. Two, background of Berkeley, like the famous, what's that tower called again? Yeah. Great, because immediately tells me if someone's from the Berkeley area, they're like, okay, I know where that is. So it tells me, okay, and you say you're a freshman, which is great. A couple of things to consider, I would say, sometimes like people say a freshman, but you're actually graduate in 3 years or whatever it is. You can say something like, freshman at University of California, Berkeley, graduating 25. And the reason why I always say that is because it gives someone an indication of when you're planning to graduate. But other recommendation is, granted, you may not know yet because you're a freshman. What's your emphasis? Like, what are you studying? Like, it's finance, or maybe it's computer science. What is your interest? A biology business. So yeah, saying freshman majoring in biology business at UC Berkeley with graduating class of blah blah blah. And that's powerful because it allows someone to see that without having to scroll down. They immediately get your indication to that. Fantastic, you already have a personalized URL, because that's super important to just start to share around, because it makes it easy, it makes you stand out versus having weird numbers and symbols on it. It's great because you have features like that's, I don't typically see that with students, but you have a featured section, because then I'm going to see that, wow, one, you care for senior citizens and you're commented there, which is fantastic because it shows that you're connected to the community. It shows certain skills in that way. It shows different things. Like, it looks like, gosh, you've been highlighted in a whole bunch of different articles, which is great.
I'm just embarrassed to show the posts and stuff, but.
No, you shouldn't be embarrassed at all. These are things that are super relevant because it allows someone to get to know you and understand how to, like, what type of skills or capabilities you actually deliver to an organization or company. Activity wise, it's okay. Like, over time, my recommendation for, especially for students, is every once in a while, like maybe monthly, post something that you think is relevant to, if you're gonna do something in biology and business or something combination wise that you're engaging. And if you're not posting stuff, the other thing to consider is engaging on content from people who are actually in that industry, because then it shows that you're following and paying attention to that industry. The one thing I don't see here is you don't have an about section. You don't, or you do? Yeah. So you want to have an about section because, as I mentioned, you want to have something that gives a little bit of additional content and value to say, what are you studying? What are your major interests are? And then if someone wants to have a conversation with you, how do they get in contact with you? Fantastic. You have all these experiences. Like, wow, as a student, like, you're involved in a whole bunch of stuff, which is good. Great that you have education, because people are going to see that too. They are going to see that you graduated in 2025, but putting it at the top, and it's great. You already started your approach of public, like, people endorsing you for skills, which is good. Courses, honor awards, fantastic. Speaking multiple languages, great. And then here, these are what I mentioned. Like, I can immediately tell what you care about or what you're paying attention to, because I see how I can immediately see the types of stuff you're following. If these are the types of things that you want to get involved with or work for, that's great, because then if you're trying to apply to any one of these types of jobs, someone's going to potentially notice and see this. They're going to also see groups or schools that you're involved with, but I'd also say influencers. Like, if you're following the people that have the little blue badge, you probably have seen that, very high profile executives. If you follow those people in the industries, like, I don't know, maybe at Amgen or, not Amgen, I don't know, trying to think of a biotech company. Yeah, you know what I mean. Pfizer, like the CEO of Pfizer. If you followed him and you wanted to work for Pfizer, it would show up here. And it gives an indication, because someone who's maybe hiring at Pfizer would go, oh, is she even paying attention to Pfizer? And they're going to see, yes, company. Oh, and she also follows the CEO. Does that make sense? Yeah, great. Yeah, no, this is great. Any questions on this, guys? So this is a pretty good starting point. The only things would be, like I mentioned, consider using the audio thing, because is it Namjoshi? Yeah, Namjoshi. So sometimes people may not know how to pronounce that, but utilize, as I showed you mine, you can use that as an opportunity, saying, hey, I'm a freshman at UC Berkeley studying biology and business, graduating in 2025. Looking in within 10 seconds, something if you want to kind of promote, like, you're looking for jobs. Anyone else want to volunteer? No? Otherwise, let me just go through SIDS because it will give you compare and contrast with SIDS. So same thing. What caught my attention for SIDS is, again, personalization all up front. My only recommendation for you, Sid, is what I mentioned as well, is talking about your focus on finance, because as I got to know you, I'm like, okay, this guy's gonna be a finance guy. Talking about that, saying when you're gonna graduate. This is what I want to highlight. See how Sid here put this about section here? This is a good example because he's a student at UC Berkeley looking to study business administration and minor in data science. Strong interest, and this is the most important part. I have a strong interest in pursuing a career in finance and have done work in private equity and governmental finance. I have a strong understanding of public equity, inclusion, and then notice here, feel free to contact me. Call to action. What does he do, or what is he focused on? What types of roles does he want to do, and how does someone get a hold of him? If you use that very basic premise, it goes a long way because it immediately grabs someone's attention. The other thing I would just say is similar, Sid, is consider over time, like the interest, like I just learned a whole bunch of stuff during lunch. That type of stuff, if you post about certain things or your interests, it's going to show people like Goldman Sachs or wherever that you know a lot about this space. And then similar to Ashita, featuring it, like consider putting some featured section so it calls attention to things that you really want to highlight when someone looks at your profile. Okay, so let me get to know that I want to give a lot of time because we're going to get close to getting pictures, and I wanted to kind of carve out at least just focus on an hour and then just making sure I have engaging conversation if people have questions, and can go through the lists of questions that may have popped up in what Neve and Adarsh sent me. So if you want to follow along, if you go to University of California, Berkeley, as I mentioned, you click on this alumni page, you can see here, this is how I mentioned Google has 4,172 alumni that work there. Microsoft was a close fourth. Well, not close, but it was fourth. And then Meta, Facebook was just after Microsoft. So I'm not going to probably Goldman here, but is there a company, I wanted to pick someone else. If you think about your ideal company, what's an ideal, for someone who hasn't said anything so far, what's a company that if you graduated this summer or in a few months, what company would you want to work for? Go ahead. Oh, Golden State Warriors. Okay. It's funny you say that because I know someone there. So if you want to work there, I'm happy to make a connection. Golden State Warriors. I'm not sure if anything's going to come up. Oh, 21 people. Did you know that? Okay. So the 21 people that work at the Golden State Warriors, I'm going to look at this. Oops, sorry. Sergio, Jason, Raghav. Granted, he just actually he hasn't even graduated yet. And he's working there. Do you know any of these people? Okay, good. So this is the power of LinkedIn, and this is all free. People don't realize this exists because if I did any of this stuff, like there's immediately, and what's your name? Jonas? Yeah. Oh, like the basketball player, Jonas, for the Bucks. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. So out of the 600,000 plus alumni, 21 are from UC Berkeley. Imagine Jonas doing that rather than just going to trying to get into Golden State Warriors just blindly, leveraging the network of 21 alumni here to potentially have a conversation. And even what I would encourage you to do, Jonas, is that if there's an opportunity for you to have a conversation like, this is the guy I know. He's the director of sales there. So if you want to do sales, like I'm happy to make a connection to that guy. Just send me a LinkedIn request. I'm happy to make a connection to that. But you can see it like if you want to do something, imagine saying, hey, you know what? I'm currently a student at UC Berkeley. I would love to have a conversation. Can I treat you to lunch or coffee? And it's a short drive. I mean, you just like go over the bridge, Bay Bridge, and say, hey, can I treat you to coffee just to understand what you do? No obligation. Just are you open to coffee? And I'm willing to pay for it because the coffee is what, less than $10. And if they're willing to spend the time, imagine. And I wouldn't do it now because they're in the playoffs, but do it off season. and saying, hey, off-season, let's say they win and you do some connection and say, hey, can I treat you to coffee? Because I would love to learn more and get into this. More often than not, hopefully one of these people will respond to you, because usually, like if I get a person reaching out to me from my university, I always respond, because I know how hard it is. I think I'm always the pay it forward guy. It's karma. If I said no, imagine back in the day for all the people that may have said no to me, I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be that person that helps students succeed, other people succeed and find that path. And here's a good example to go do that. Cool. Anyone else want to do a quick example? I mean, you guys can do this on your own, but anyone else want to throw out a name and I can just show it and talk about it? There has to be an amazing company you guys would want to work for. Otherwise, I can pull up Blackstone, because I know they need. Okay, we'll do Blackstone. Because I was curious when I did this, when Neve mentioned that, I'm like, huh, how many people work there? 37. So people who know Blackstone, it's a big P&E firm. So as you scroll through this, Neve, imagine all these people that can potentially create a connection for. But let me show you something even better. So as I scroll over, see where, because I think Neve mentioned that he would love to work in New York. Out of the 226 alumni, 39 people live in New York, and here are the 39. So you're narrowing it down. Now you can get very prescriptive, because if you want to work in New York for Blackstone, here are the people that you can have a conversation with. And then I'll take it a step further. So imagine the degree. What did they study? You said economics, right? Yeah. Okay. So imagine you get in contact with the people who studied economics. Here are the, what is this? 11. So I narrowed it down. Here are the 11 alumni that work at Blackstone that live in New York City that studied economics. Imagine the commonality when Neve reaches out, because it's like, oh, I'm graduating with an economics degree in this state. I'd love to work for Blackstone. I'd love to live in New York City. That's a very powerful statement to go reach out to one of these people. I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to respond, but most likely, especially this person, I don't know if you know Emily Chen. Well, you probably don't, because you're a freshman. But people who may be juniors, you might. Do you know her? Okay. She just graduated a few years ago. That's a perfect. I would look for people who recently graduated, because those are the people more likely to really engage, because they're like, oh my gosh, I just graduated from UC Berkeley. These are the types of people to engage with. Does that make sense, everybody? So they're so powerful. Where they live, where they work, what do they do, what did they study, how they connected, or where are they skilled at. This also gives you a sense too, as you apply for jobs, when people are working for the companies that you aspire to do, or that role that they work at, look at what type of skills do they have. And then look at yourself going, do I have those skills? And if you don't, what a great icebreaker too, saying, hey, I'd love to gain that skill that you have. How did you do that? Can I treat you to coffee to understand how you got that skill? Did you get a mentor? Did you take a class? How did they get that skill to get to that point? Make sense? Okay. I'm going to play a video here and then just open it up for questions. I'm going to call action. Just really open it for questions of what you guys might have or top of mind, and also go through these questions too, make sure I didn't miss anything. But let me just run this quick video to kind of whet your appetite. If I didn't, hopefully you came across the value of LinkedIn, but if I didn't do it justice, this video hopefully will give you a point of view.
Watching this, chances are good you want to get a job. You want to go from student to rising star. You want to avoid eating the same meals over and over and over again. Good news, you're in the right place. That's right, LinkedIn. It's not just for top executives. It's not just for old people with heavy briefcases. It's for you, and it's the perfect place for you to start your professional story. Say you want to get a job in New York City. Never been there before, but that's okay, because you have LinkedIn on your side. Start by creating a profile. You give it love because you know it's what recruiters are looking for day and night. It's your resume that never sleeps. It's your flashing neon sign that says, hire me, for the love of all that is good in this world, hire me. Then you start making connections. Alumni working in New York? Yes. Recruiters at top companies in New York? Yes. Your mom's best friend? Yes. Start imagining whose shoes you want to walk in. You think, wow, this is a lot of deep stuff to consider. You shake yourself out of it and start searching for jobs. Whoa, that's a lot of jobs for students. Time to get down to business. You start to tailor your profile. You start applying. You feel empowered, control, like you should be CEO. That gives you an idea. You look up all the CEOs of all the companies you want to work at. You see one of them went to your university. Then it hits you. You see a clear path from campus to career. You feel like you can see the future. You wonder if you're psychic. Should you start a hotline? No, back to plan A. You keep tailoring and connecting and applying, and before you know it, you start getting responses. First a few, then more, then an interview, and then you're hired. And that's when the real learning begins.
Cool. Granted, that video is a little bit older, but it's super resonated with me when I came across this video a couple years ago and started to use that in presentations. So let me go back here. So what are some things you can do like sometime this week or even today? One, update your profile. Hopefully I gave you some really quick tips and tricks on things you can do, because it's great that to see everyone actually have a profile. You can now do simple things like updating your professional picture, having a personalized URL, making sure everything's filled out, and then two, leverage your university alumni page. Really bless you. Start play around with whatever companies you might have in top of mind. Start to build out, like, go, is there a UC Berkeley alumni person that worked or former student that works there? Connect with your peers, your faculty, alumni. I would say also connect with your family members. Like all your parents, I'm pretty confident probably have LinkedIn profiles, I hope. If they're successful at what they're doing, paying for your college tuition here, I'm pretty confident in the business world, they're probably on LinkedIn. You should connect with them. You should connect with their friends, other family members, because the bigger you grow your professional network, that really helps to make the right connections. And then I can't stress enough, you want to personalize everything. So not just your profile, but when you do reach outs of connections, messages, etc., always personalize it with not just saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a job, but what's the commonality? Find the commonalities. Maybe you went to the same high school. Maybe you went to the same fraternity or whatever it is. Create that commonality and then say, can we create that connection? Can I have that opportunity to meet with you? And then more likely than not, there's a high probability of this well. So that is a website. So if you want to bookmark that, screenshot it, that's the site that has a couple of additional resources, not just the video. Also, when I mentioned like how you get recruiters' attention with the open to hiring thing, I put a link on LinkedIn that talks about a little bit more detail how that's done. And a shameless plug, I also put, like, for anyone who may be interested in Microsoft, I put a shameless plug as to the link as to where you would go if you wanted to look for an internship or early in-career opportunities at Microsoft. And the presentation. So anyone who wants that deck that actually has some of the examples of the words you can use when you do reach out, that website, aka.ms/one day to day one, has all that content. And of course, connect with me or follow me or do a combination of both, because I'd love to just stay digitally connected. If I can help out at all, you now have a contact. If anyone in this room never had a contact at Microsoft, now you do. You have me. I'm happy to connect with you because I know I've spoken with some of you in this room, and definitely, Jonas, if you want me to make a connection to that person at Golden State Warriors, just remind me, send me a note, and I'm happy to make a connection for you. Okay, cool. So we can give this going. I know it's 7:40. These guys have to take me back to the airport because I am flying back on a 9:50 flight, but I'm happy to stay as long as you guys want. If you're not comfortable asking a question in front of your broad peers, no problem. Just feel free to come up afterwards. But before I offer that up, are there any other things that are top of mind that I can cover in the broad audience? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just about resumes.
Yeah.
Would you recommend like the LinkedIn resume feature where like you upload your resume and it auto selects things and then you like can edit those auto selected, or do you recommend just like setting up an extra portion and just uploading your resume?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say you want to, the LinkedIn resume is good, but there's stuff in there that you can put more stuff in an offline resume. So I would have the foundation be LinkedIn so that if anyone's looking at, because there's an option to export it to a PDF, you can do that. But then I always tell people, even myself, I have an offline Word document that actually has more stuff in there that I wouldn't necessarily put on my LinkedIn profile, but I would put on a resume that I would actually upload. Granted, I'm not looking for a job and I haven't looked for a job in forever because I've been at Microsoft 15 years. So hopefully that helps. But there's different schools of thought. Some people believe in the other side. I don't. You can't go wrong either way. I just believe in you want to have your LinkedIn resume as a foundation, but having a Word document that actually has potentially more stuff you want to highlight. Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. I know there's more questions here. Let me make sure I covered off on this stuff. One of the questions, how helpful is LinkedIn reality? Hopefully I addressed that question. Someone asked that question of how helpful is LinkedIn. I think it's very helpful. I think if you created that combination, I would first and foremost, be a student, like enjoy your undergraduate. Like I look fondly on the 4 years I was undergraduate and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was some of the best 4 years of my life, including that's where I met my wife. So utilize that time, but also just think about, because you spend so much time on other social platforms, think about setting your personal brand to set yourself up for a job after you graduate, whenever that is. Because some of you may decide that you want to get a master's degree. Fantastic. That content to go do that, you can utilize the exact same principles here. So even if you're looking for a master's degree, go to places where someone's maybe a student at whatever master's program you want to go do, and do that research, whether it be a lawyer. I know I met someone that wanted to be a lawyer. Same type of concept. I love this question. What setback allowed you to grow the most? I would say it's always having a growth mindset, because the number of times I would say people thought, oh, when you apply to Microsoft, like you're probably the type of person that got in the first time. I actually didn't. I got turned down 3 times. I applied to Microsoft when I first graduated from college, turned down. Didn't have the right skills. Applied 2 years later for a role, didn't have enough experience. Third time I applied, I was the second person. They selected someone else, and they selected the other person because there was a current Microsoft employee. Fourth time, finally got in. And it was just by the chance that I worked at a company called SAP that's has a big office here in the Bay Area in Palo Alto. I didn't want to travel anymore because I started a family, and I sold to Microsoft, and I utilized, using your network, I utilized my Microsoft network to get me a job at Microsoft. And it's not even close to the job I have now, because it was in IT. And I'm not, and there's no offense to people in IT, I'm not an IT guy. I'm a people person. I like being in front of people talking about stuff. So I did IT for a year and then grew my career and now lead a global organization for partners. I can go through this on and on, but I want to be respectful for you guys too as students, because you probably are like, okay, I just want to get out of here, Brian. I got studying to do. I want to get my picture. So I'm going to end it here, but it doesn't mean to say you guys can't come up afterwards. I'm going to also stop this live recording for everyone who's watching online. And thanks everyone, because there might be people following me right now that are watching this. If there's comments happening in the live stream feed, I'll look at it and respond to it later. But thanks for people in this room. Thank you for people online, and thank you, Adar, Shanice specifically, and the committee too. I don't want to, the great committee that's sitting over here for coordinating this, because it's truly a pleasure. Hopefully each of you found value out of this. I hope you did, because I enjoyed having conversations, getting to know some of you over the course of the day, walking the campus. But thanks again. If I can help out at all, don't hesitate to reach out, and good luck in whatever you decide to do. And if you're graduating this year, congratulations. If you have a few years left, enjoy the time, and yeah, let me know how I can help.